Charles, we've got a very special guest today. We are joined by Kelly Sadler. How are you, Charles? And Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Kelly, it's great to have you join us. We really appreciate your spending the time with us. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about this America First PAC, what its chief objectives are, and how you got involved with it.
Yeah, so America First Action PAC is the officially sanctioned White House PAC for the president's reelection. So our number one objective is to get the president reelected in 2020. We're focusing on battleground states, so Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, etc. We're running ads in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin right now, focusing on Joe Biden's abysmal economic record and juxtaposing that against the president and who is best suited to rebuild the economy after COVID-19. And that hands down is President Trump. But we're raising money, and every dollar that we raise now is going into the president's reelection campaign. We're doing polling, we're doing focus groups, and we're trying to get the message of both the president's accomplishments out there, as well as define Joe Biden and his 47-year-long record.
Abysmal record. But one of the things I've noticed, even on, and I like many of the people at Fox, but even on Fox News, I have noticed that their polling approach, in my humble opinion, is ridiculous, because what I see in my personal experience amongst my friends, I was always a conservative Republican economically, but the rhinos I just don't like. I don't really view myself as a reflexive Republican. I'm independent. And I think a key issue with polling is deciding what the pocket should be. How many Democrat likely voters, how many Republican, and how many truly independent. And then also to think about, are people really going to be honest with a pollster, not knowing necessarily who that pollster is really working for? So I would guess that your polls are going to be a lot more scientific than the Fox polls. And who the hell is in charge of these Fox polls?
Well, the Fox polls, but we've also seen other national polls. We saw a poll from the New York Times today that was a national poll, and we dismissed those polls. And Kellyanne, when she was running the campaign in 2016, said that they never conducted a national poll, and neither are we. We're just conducting polls that are in the battlegrounds, because those are the states that will win us the election. But this New York Times poll, it oversampled both Florida and New York State. And then it also oversampled Democrats versus Republicans. And then it also skewed, and this is what we're seeing with all of these polls, is that they base it on registered voters. Right. We know for a fact that not all registered voters go and turn out in November, and that a more indicative poll is of likely voters. And that's where the president does particularly well, because there's an enthusiasm gap between President Donald J. Trump and Joe Biden. Donald Trump supporters would run through a brick wall to go vote for him, whereas Joe Biden's, they may or they may not turn out in November.
You mean on November 6th?
Yeah, November 3rd. Yeah, November 6th, yeah.
Joe Biden definitely has the basement dweller vote, though. I wonder if the president is worrying about that.
I don't think any of us are worrying about that vote.
Yeah.
One thing that I also noticed in 2015-16, I was focused and still remain focused on exposing the Clinton Foundation fraud. And I didn't want my work doing that to be politicized in the 15-16 cycle. I also live here in New York City, where my vote fundamentally doesn't matter. So I did not vote. However, in this cycle, now that I've watched the damage that it's not the do-nothing Democrats, it's the destroy America Democrats are willing to do. When I see what they've done since really Election Day 2016, but now with the House under the control of these lunatics, I mean, it's not simply in my mind that we need to get Donald Trump across the line. We've got to get conservative, economic, literate people in the House and in the Senate who are prepared to defend against the evildoers that we see literally demolishing the country. It's that big a fight.
No, absolutely. And not only congressional representatives, but even further down ballot.
Yeah.
Vote for your mayor, vote for your city representatives, vote for your school board. We've seen with COVID-19 that a lot of these governors have given these decisions to local lawmakers. And, I live in the state of Virginia. Well, Fairfax County made the decision today that we're not going to have school in the fall. We'll be able to do virtual school 4 days a week, or have the option of having our kids go in for 2 days a week. And these decisions are being made at the very local level. So it's important that we get in and we vote, all the way from your local representatives to the President of the United States, because this election is going to be crucial on whether we reopen our country and get back to work and get back to normal, whether we, accept defunding the police as a legitimate policy platform, whether we accept our monuments being torn down all throughout this country and our history being erased. And that's what this election is really about.
I agree. And another dimension I noticed in 2016, I believe Donald Trump got a small percentage of the black female vote and a low teens percentage of the black male vote. And then I saw a poll of likely black voters a couple of weeks ago that suggested he would get 40% of likely black voters. That certainly is not reflected in any of the Fox reporting. Forget MSNBC. I'd rather watch a good spy thriller or a romantic comedy or something than that garbage. But even on One American News or Fox, I don't think they're focused enough on that, and I don't think they're focused enough on the conservative, responsible black citizens who look at what's going on in Chicago and they hear these white liberals or this fake Black Lives Matter Sean King, who, as far as I know, he is not black. I think his mother was white and his father was white, saying these ridiculous things that are only destroying cities like Chicago and now New York and other places. So I actually think Donald Trump's message, and frankly, the Republican message, is resonating a lot more in 2020 and could be pivotal in this election.
Well, we certainly hope so. And if you look at just what happened today, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina introduced a police reform bill in the U.S. Senate. This bill, the nation has been calling for this bill, and it made a lot of inroads into looking at these police departments and holding them up to best practices, to saying that, chokehold should be, if you use chokeholds or you authorize this, then federal funding could be withdrawn. It made a lot of progress in terms of accountability and transparency within these departments. And the Senate Democrats didn't even bring this bill up for a debate on the floor. They shot it down. He offered them 20 amendments. If you don't like my bill, let's talk, let's negotiate. What amendments do you want to put on the bill? Instead, they walked out. Now, this is a black GOP senator who's worked across the aisle to get something passed that the nation is calling for, and these Democrats won't even talk to him, won't even bring the bill up for debate. So what are they waiting for? This is what he said. What are they waiting for? Are you, instead of taking 70 or 80% of what you want, you're going to shoot that down today, so that maybe you'll win in November? Even if you do win in November, you can add on the extra 20. But this is something that the country is demanding right now. But partisan politics got in the way because Democrats are just going to all ends to portray Republicans as racist and as opposed to change and not for the black community. We actually are. We're putting proposals out there and they're being shot down by the Democrats.
Yeah, and it's amazing that their counterparts in the House of Representatives were busy arguing, banging on tables, preventing anybody from actually speaking truth, while they continue to just rely on the Russiagate conclusions and avoid any kind of inquiry into the Mueller investigation.
Yeah, that's a good topic, Jason. I mean, one of the things we started doing this podcast in June of 2017. So just literally as the Mueller investigation was ramping up. And we've done how many, Jason? 240 podcasts averaging 2 hours going into this. And I said early on, forget obstruction of justice. President Trump has an absolute duty and obligation to obstruct injustice, which is exactly what this investigation was in the very beginning. There never was a legitimate predicate to go after, for Mueller to be hired to do anything without disclosing his conflicts. Mueller, Comey, and Rosenstein all failed to see obvious Clinton Foundation frauds that were right there and remain out there from 2001 to 2005. They were all on that team, and they missed it. How can you then bring them in here and get people to land on Mueller and land on Manafort, land on all these people, because they're trying to make sure that Trump gets toppled so nobody looks at what really was going on. I would hope that the various people who are targeted here and who stand in jeopardy, like Roger Stone and others, I would hope that not only might they get pardoned, but that they would have a grounds to sue personally a lot of these people. I don't know if that's legally possible or not.
Well, we saw with General Flynn today, the federal court dismissing his case, and that was justice served. He doesn't need a pardon. He's been fully exonerated. You had this horrible Russia collusion narrative, which was started and funded by the DNC through an Oppo book, the Steele dossier, which has been thoroughly and utterly discredited. But that's what they built the whole premise on. They leaked it to the media. This followed the president for 3 years, these negative news headlines that were just based on garbage. The Mueller investigation, based on garbage. He found nothing. But the Democrats, what have they done since they won the House of Representatives for the American people? They've done absolutely nothing. All they've tried to do is discredit this president and throw him out of office, a duly elected president. It's been absolutely disgusting to watch them in action.
Well, one thing that Lou Dobbs is I think, one of the better people on television, and I generally try to watch his show from 5 to 6. But he makes the point, we've been making the point, that if you want to talk about stealing an election, the election of 2018 was stolen. Mueller knew, many people knew, well before that election that there was no there in the Russian hoax. Mm-hmm. And not only that, had they really looked at the notes we're now finding out about, Barack Obama directing the right people to go on it, according to Peter Strzok in today's Rantingly, and Biden himself saying, let's use the Logan Act. I mean, that was known back in January of 2017, and there's a lot of incriminating evidence, I would guess, still inside the Justice Department, still inside the FBI. Why is it that Donald Trump cannot, wring Christopher Wray's neck and push Bill Barr to actually come clean? Where is all this evidence?
Well, AG Barr said, I think on Mornings with Maria Bartiromo, that he suspects that his investigation, or Durham's investigation, will wrap up, by the fall or by the end of this summer. And that is something that we're all looking forward to, that it was delayed a little bit because of COVID-19. So we're certainly looking forward to his report. And I expect that there will be some blockbusters, mainly that the Obama, administration used our intelligence agencies to go after a political opponent, which is unheard of. They weaponized our intelligence agencies to go after a political opponent. And then they didn't let that go. It was still happening during the transition after the president won, of them getting in the Oval Office, wondering about, reauthorizing, the wiretaps on Carter Page, or the FISA warrants on Carter Page, as well as Flynn, and what did they know, and making sure that Comey was briefed on all of this, because he was the only one that was going to be staying in power after the president was inaugurated. It was absolutely disgusting, but you brought up a great point. Joe Biden has said that he knew nothing about the Flynn investigation, that he was just an ancillary player. But then today, with Strzok's notes, we learned that he was the one who actually brought up the fact that they used the Logan Act against Flynn, and that's a way that they could entrap him. We need to know more about what Joe Biden knew and when he knew it.
Exactly. I mean, what he knew and what he's forgotten.
Right. What he's able
when
to
you mention Joe
remember.
Biden, I think of Colonel Klink and Sergeant Schultz, Hogan's Heroes. I mean, Joe Biden, I remember, I think it was Zell Miller. Zell was a Democrat, I believe, and there was some issue with Biden, and he got up and he gave the most damning speech I've ever heard about Joe Biden, citing chapter and verse. I think it was at one of the conventions. He just went through every single major policy prescription that Joe Biden has ever offered up, and every single one of them was wrong. Now, a good friend of mine who actually was in politics did mention that it's extremely valuable to find somebody who's always wrong, because if you ask them what to do and you just do the opposite. But do you even think Joe Biden is going to make it across the line to be the Democratic nominee in August?
I get asked this question literally on pretty much every interview that I do. And I think at this point, they've come too far not to nominate him. And he's doing a great job, right? He's hiding in his basement. The whole campaign strategy is to keep him, out of the public and to limit the interviews that he does. He hasn't done a press conference now, I believe, in 82 days. And I've just never seen a campaign that doesn't actually campaign. But Joe Biden will have to come out eventually. I don't know even what's happening with the Democratic convention. I don't know if it's just going to be all digital, if there's just going to be some sort of coronation. But, Joe Biden will have to come out of his basement to debate Donald Trump. And let me just tell you that it's going to be amazing television, because what Joe Biden's been hiding from and not practicing for in these last several months, he's going to be hit over the head with Donald J. Trump.
I think so. I mean, I have to say that Donald Trump, in the 2015-16 cycle, I think it was fair that a number of people who might now vote for Donald Trump said, well, wait a minute, this is his first try. Yeah, he's a celebrity. Yeah, he's a billionaire. Does he really know how to manage something as vast as the federal government? And I think he's got amazing chops, amazing resume, in face of the most strenuous opposition that I think any newly elected president has gotten. No honeymoon period, no nothing. He went directly into the media doghouse. And look what he got done without controlling Congress. Imagine what he could get done with the right judges, the right people in the House, committee chairmen in the House and the Senate, who were not concerned about the Potomac country club social scene and instead wanted to get stuff done. Imagine what he could get done. And I think that message, once he gets a chance to get back out constantly the way he should, is really going to resonate. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, just this week, he nominated his 200th federal judge. He's been doing a great job with the courts. And every day he's had opposition. But I mean, he's passed, the greatest tax reform bill in a generation. The deregulation that's been going on in his administration has been outstanding, pulling back unneeded, unwarranted federal regulations. He's unleashed our energy sector, where we're energy independent for the first time ever. He's also renegotiated all of these bad trade deals into deals that will bring investment back into America. Everything that he's campaigned on and promised, he has managed to deliver, while in office. And so imagine what another 4 years could be like, especially if we can win back the House.
Yeah. And another thing I was just wondering about, I know you said your focus is the battleground states. And I look back at the 15-16 cycle, not many people noticed the fact that Donald Trump actually spent a lot less money than Hillary Clinton and still beat her. So with less money, and I think Hillary Clinton is a far more formidable candidate even now than Joe Biden is today. So I think you have a funding advantage, and I think they have a funding disability. And I wonder if wouldn't also make sense to have maybe not your PAC, but another PAC pick the expensive media markets like New York and California and force the Democrats to actually counter in those markets, depleting their war chest, not expecting necessarily to win, although miracles happen. I mean, George Pataki was a Republican and he took New York. Didn't Ronald Reagan win 49 states?
Yeah, yes, in his second term, there was a landslide. We are still focused on the battlegrounds, especially the industrial, the Rust Belt, Midwest. Those are traditionally blue states. And so the fact that the Biden campaign has to play in Wisconsin, has to play in Michigan, has to play in Pennsylvania, those are states that we're actively engaged in. We're not allowing them to expand their map. They've got to defend their territory. States like Texas, they'll never play in. It's too expensive. It's solidly red. You hear all these media stories. Oh, Democrats have a chance in Texas. I'm sorry, they just do not. The state's too big, too expensive. We're also seeing some good news come out of Florida, and Florida is turning more red. It is a traditional battleground state that everyone has to focus money into, but we're feeling good about that. In terms of expanding the electoral map for us, it's states like Minnesota, New Hampshire, Nevada, that we think that we could play in. You know, states like New York and California, they're just too expensive and too blue and too controlled by, you know, the urban areas, which are just run by Democrats.
Yeah, in the area of raising money, we have stumbled across this. We've been looking at Black Lives Matter. I don't know if you've seen the latest stories on Black Lives Matter, but there is no actual lawful charity in the United States of America called Black Lives Matter that is organized and operated and was validly made tax exempt by the IRS. There simply isn't. There is an entity that you might know about called Act Blue, which is the progressive Democrat fundraising machine, which I submit is also illegally organized. Its charity is illegally organized. They raise money for that charity, and that charity then funnels it to something else called Thousand Currents, and Thousand Currents then takes that money and slips it to these people who are not charities. It's strictly illegal what they're doing. But what we just noticed, and you might find incredibly interesting, is that one of the leading lights behind Thousand Currents is a woman named Susan Rosenberg. And Susan Rosenberg was sentenced, I believe it was, to 56 years in federal prison for attempting to blow up the Capitol, buildings in the Capitol. And guess who pardoned Susan Rosenberg on January 20th, 2001? Bill Clinton. This woman, was served extensive hard time in federal prison and is now the vice chair of that Thousand Currents. And she is an avowed Marxist, proud member of the Weather Underground. I mean, and she's on the receiving end of gigantic flows of money that nobody is policing. We are already down a track of making people aware of this, but I just want to make sure you knew about that. It's not fair to have you comply with the rules at your PAC, and these people, open up these rivers of untraceable money that then get funneled to candidates that have not only no credentials, but are more intent on tearing down the country than acting responsibly.
Well, I did not know about any of that. I do know that when I was a journalist at the Washington Times years ago, I tracked the money about the Ferguson protests and whether they were organic or not organic, and did, the money kind of trace the money back, and found that was largely funded by George Soros's Open Societies foundation that was giving grants to many of these other charities, C4s, that then organized people to go out to Ferguson to protest. So I wouldn't be surprised that things like that are still happening today and are a little bit better organized and a little bit more under the radar. But I, from my perspective, don't know anything about it at this point.
Another thing to watch on that one, we're already making a lot of noise about it, and others are going to make even more noise about it. Another thing they do is, instead of following normal procedures, they create these GoFundMe accounts. As of Friday, there were 9,000 GoFundMe accounts set up by people. In one day, it went from 8 to 9, saying they were raising money for Black Lives Matter, which doesn't exist as an organization, and you can't do that. But nonetheless, GoFundMe says, we'll sign you guys up. And there ought to be an even playing field. There isn't an even playing field on Twitter, on Facebook, on Google. There should be, and there isn't a level playing field on GoFundMe. This stuff needs to be regulated.
I support everyone's right to protest and to organize. What I do not agree with are, the anarchists and those people who are going out there and want to fundamentally re-alter our country. Our country was founded on the principles of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, Judeo-Christian values, with about freedom and your liberties. And the last thing I want to see this country move into is a socialist country where, the elites decide what you should be doing, that they know better, and that Washington dictates your every move and your every step. And I'm very concerned about the censoring of conservative media online and on these social platforms. I mean, just yesterday, the president's tweet about, we will use force if you try to take down our monuments was monitored by Twitter as an offensive or a threatening, insightful tweet. That nonsense has got to stop. I believe that the more voices there are in any forum, the better, and that we should be having more debate, not less debate. But I'm not worried. The left is trying to silence those who dissent with it. And I don't like anything about this cancel culture that goes along with it, because I find it very scary, just for my son's future.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I grew up or graduated from college in '78, and so I was young in the '60s. But I remember the theme in the late '60s and the early '70s is you have to be more tolerant. The establishment has to be more tolerant. You have to welcome these opposing views. Where has that group gone? As they've aged, it's now there is only one correct view, and we don't even want to debate with you. If you won't accept, if you won't prostrate yourself down before us, we're going to, as you say, cancel your job. We're going to cancel your pension. We're going to kick you off these platforms. That just cannot be something that we should allow to continue under the Trump administration right now. And in addition, I would urge the Trump administration, your campaign, to think through re-regulating charities, particularly educational institutions. The ones I went to, Yale and Harvard, I'm ashamed to admit that I went to Yale and Harvard, watching what is going on now, the way in which they stifle conservative thought, they stifle opposing views. Meanwhile, they're getting massive tax benefits and massive government grants. And I would think that there's a way to put that back in balance and say, wait a minute, is Harvard University a hedge fund? Or is it, actually training people in professions where you can't make a lot of money, which was the original idea behind Harvard, to train ministers?
Well, the president did go after Harvard after they were allocated, what was it, a PPP loan for COVID-19 economic relief. They qualified to get, and I mean, with their endowment, and what this was meant to go to small businesses. And after much back and forth, I believe they gave that money back. But this is the type of fraud that we cannot allow to happen at the federal government level, and to these institutions that have a huge endowment and they make money from kids attending the schools. They shouldn't be getting any handouts from the government, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, you've been very generous with your time, Kelly. Is there anything one message you'd like to have our viewers take home from this talk today?
The bottom line is that Joe Biden has been in public service for 47 years. He is now campaigning on basically that he can solve the problems that he helped create while he was in office. His record is abysmal. He's been in office for 47 years. Can you name an accomplishment? Can you name one thing that he has done that has bettered your lives? He was vice president during the Ferguson outbreaks, during the Baltimore outbreaks. What did him and Barack Obama do on helping out with police reform? This President Donald J. Trump's already issued an executive order. Republicans already have a bill in the Senate that they're trying to push through. What hope and change does Joe Biden stand for? Period.
Well, you're being polite here, so you're not bringing up the corruption. I mean, here's a guy who has never worked an honest day in his life in the private sector, and he lives in, I believe it's a DuPont estate, 10,000 square foot house in Delaware there. I mean, how did he make the money to pay for that house? And that's before we bring up Hunter Biden and the recent developments in the Ukraine in the last 24 hours, that apparently the price on getting this investigation stopped was $50 million. They were trying to pay $50 million to the Ukrainians to stop this thing. They must be trying to cover up a lot more than $50 million worth of problems. And that's also before you start talking about, as the president, I like the way he says this, talks about China with Biden. I mean, it's nuts. I come out of the private equity business. There's no way that some scruffy Yale Law School graduate with no experience investing would get $1.5 billion for a brand new private equity fund if the Chinese government didn't expect to get many times the $1.5 billion back from whatever connections they had to the Biden family. I mean, I think it's radioactive.
Yeah, you weren't flying over on Air Force Two with your dad as vice president, right? And then and flying back. I think that there's an advantage there.
Yes. So did Hunter register as a foreign agent?
I think he did.
He did?
I think he did, but it's very complicated. It's very in the weeds, but I can get back to you on all of that information. We have it all. But Hunter, it was such a sketchy deal that even John Kerry's son said, listen, I don't think this is a good idea. I'm walking away from it.
That's
I understood he was more into crack than weed, but that's a little bit of a revelation right there.
So, Kelly, we'd love to have you back on as the campaign progresses. We actually would also love an opportunity to somehow interview either the president or the vice president to try to get their take out to our large audience that's growing. But thank you very much for your time, and we'll be back in touch with you or your assistant to try to schedule a follow-up.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Good luck.
And before you go, Kelly, I just want to remind our viewers who do support the president in his bid to be reelected to visit a1apac.org, and you can contribute to the campaign and keep abreast of what is going on with President Trump's campaign rallies. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelly. We'll speak with you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Charles, that was a great interview with Kelly Sadler right there.
Very nice of her. Very nice of her to take the time. She's got a big job and a lot to do, and I know we'll want to catch up with her in the next month or so.
Absolutely. And I think what's happening is with my new system, people are a little confused as to when their call has been disconnected, but we're good now. So Kelly is, you don't need the headphones anymore.
Right.
So Charles, there's a ton of really disturbing things going on.
Yeah, I would say here in New York City, and I moved here, I shouldn't admit this, but I was moved here almost 61 years ago when I was 3 years old on Memorial Day weekend. And so I have, some of my earliest memories are of Washington Square Park back in the day, growing up as a young child there, and really
with or without drug addicts in the fountain.
That was in the 70s. But in the 60s, it was nannies, and very in the early 60s, it was prosperous. It was the city was doing well. In the late 60s, it got ugly. In the 70s, it nearly went bankrupt. But I have never seen New York City in a more disgusting place than it is today, where we have, back in the 60s, the government, the public, in quotes, servants, didn't make that much money. Now you have many, many New York City people in government making, in just base salary, $100,000 for getting their pensions, and the fact that they may be doing other work on the side, and they're wasting.
The hours are kind of
right.
light.
Exactly, and the mayor's wife could be given $800 million for some project, then whoops, I don't know what happened to it. I mean, that didn't happen in the early 60s.
Let's stop on that for a second. What exactly happened with that situation? What was the $800 million for, and how does it just disappear with nobody saying anything?
Well, because it's just like the Clinton Foundation. The books of all these government entities are not ever presented back to you, the taxpayer, in a way where you can say, here's the money that went in during the year, and here's the money that went out during the year, and here are the contractors who received money, and here are the terms of those contracts. You can't check any of this. You get happy horseshit from all government entities talking about how, well, the air is cleaner, and we repaved this many roads, and we have this many people went through our hospitals and our jails, whatever. It doesn't really break it down the way I like to see it. What is the average pay of the people in New York City?
There's 10,000 of it right there.
Right. What's the average pay of the people working in New York City in government? What are the terms of their employment? How much vacation do they get? How much pay? And how does that compare to the average person paying taxes in New York City, including the hedge fund gazillionaires and the finance people and the movie stars and all that? How does that compare and contrast? And I think you're going to find out that there are too many people officially working, and then there are way too many people on pension and feather bedding jobs, and there's no checking of any of that. Beyond that, when you walk down the streets now, it's just anecdotal. We've done a lot of it together. Yeah. I'd encourage people to go and look at our walkabouts. You have a special playlist, I think, for those.
Yep.
Yeah. And
it's an absolute disaster.
Right. You walk around, and it's set up to get worse. It's set up to fail more badly. We're going to July 4th. I imagine that the people who are trying to construct images and narratives around the path through the election are looking at July 4th and saying, they're rubbing their hands and saying, what better footage can we get than to see fireworks and fires and mobs in the streets on July 4th, pulling down statues. That's the direction I think they're headed in a city like New York, where the police have said they're going to call in sick on July 4th.
That's outrageous.
And de Blasio has disbanded the plainclothes people already. I mean, it's like if you what's that game where you build cities?
Oh, Sim City.
Sim City. It's almost like it's destroy Sim City is what they're creating. It's, let's see, what is the stupidest thing I could do today? Oh, I know. We'll get rid of the plainclothes police and encourage the policemen not to come in on a national holiday, July 4th, where it could be very hot. We'll allow this guy, Sean King, who he did shout fire in a crowded theater, to suggest, and I'm not religious, but to suggest that
destroy Jesus statues.
Yeah, where Jesus is depicted as a Western European or an American. I mean, that is just outrageous commentary, and it's amplified through the media by these media execs who are seeing their audiences disappear and are therefore that much more dependent on advertisers. I mean, this is not a time to let these kind of things just slip by, because we could, if things don't go right, these professional agitators tied to the Weather Underground, this woman who's the vice chair of Thousand Currents, served time in prison for trying to blow up the U.S. Capitol. You don't think she's not thinking about doing that again?
Of course. I don't understand why people haven't paid any attention. Bill Clinton pardoned this woman who's a member of the Weather Underground, and also something called the May 19th, something or other. They bombed something on May 19th, the Capitol building, I think. But I've always heard that was attributed to the Weather Underground. So this is not new that we've got Antifa, Black Lives Matters. There's people who, we saw Black Lives Matters New York. I mean, it's not like that's
there is no Black Lives Matter. And as our viewers will know well, and I noticed that the subscription count for you is up to over 110,000 now.
Yeah.
111,000. I hope that the viewership will circulate this particular podcast in particular and dig in and tuck in to this Thousand Currents, this Act Blue. Our friend Katerina Blanova at Sputnik has a fantastic piece out today on tracing some of the elements of the problems with Thousand Currents. There you go. I mean, this person, Susan Rosenberg, who's down the May 19th Communist Organization. How does a communist organization, somebody who spent time in prison and serious time in prison, who is proud to be a communist,
Susan terrorism.
Rosenberg, for terrorism. How do you fill out the paperwork on the New York State charity filing thing? You're the vice chair of the organization. You're supposed to disclose defects in your background. The fact that you tried to blow up the U.S. Capitol. And that you're still an inveterate. If you go on to her Thousand Currents, if you go to the leadership page, she brags about it. It's almost like, what's that guy, David Kendall at Williams and Connolly, who brags about it. He opens up his biography saying he started his career off as a lawyer by going to jail. He was proud of that.
Thousand Currents.
Yeah, there you go.
It is amazing to me, Charles. It seems like they're saying like, this or that statue was a slave owner or was doing this terrible thing, but then they're delighted and proud of murderers.
Yeah, it's.
And I'm not saying that owning a slave was a good thing, but I mean, let's have a vote about removing statues. You can't just destroy stuff. This is what causes me to be very concerned about this mantra of no justice, no peace. They think justice is mob justice, and that's not society. It's the degradation of society. So they're in San Francisco or Oakland. Oh, look at their address, Charles. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, can we go into the leadership of this? Because her biography is on here somewhere.
Careers.
Learn more.
Financials, we could look at that. Connect, learn.
What we do, about, I think it'll probably have the leadership in about. Huh?
Is it in English? Donate, contact.
Well, if you just go into Google and put Susan Rosenberg biography or something like that.
too common of a name.
Board of Directors, Thousand Currents.
There we go. Oops.
Oh. Let's go back to Wikipedia then.
Seems like they maybe have recently deleted it. Well, why don't we go to the Internet Archive and see if it's still there?
Okay.
So while I'm doing that, Charles, there was a very disturbing thing last night where I guess, I don't even like to call them protesters anymore, Charles, insurgents in Madison, the capital of Wisconsin, destroyed a statue of Hans Christian Berg, I think his last name was. And this is a guy who emigrated to the United States from Norway in like 1840 or something like that, which I can share with our audience. It's a pain in the ass going to Norway in 2020. 1840, you had to be a pretty tough hombre to be able to make it. And this guy found slavery so abhorrent that he took up the fight against it. And the statue there is for him being a hero of the Civil War.
Right.
Okay, here's the board of directors page. And they ripped this guy's statue down. Now, 1860s, 70s, this guy's going to have grandchildren, great-grandchildren who are still alive, maybe probably still in Wisconsin. He's got to be the pride of the family, having a statue there at the Capitol building, and now they destroyed it, desecrated the memory of this guy who's died. But you know what? If you're George Floyd and you hold a gun up to a pregnant woman and go, counterfeit money and do fentanyl and whatever, you're a hero.
Right. Well, actually, here's a thought for the crowd. If we slowly go through this, I think we should research every single one of these people. Start with this person. I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name. As restorative economics practitioner. What the hell does that mean?
Reparations, I think.
She supports projects that build resilient, healthy, and self-determined communities rooted in shared prosperity.
That's
garbage.
Code word for socialism,
right.
Shared prosperity.
Yeah.
It's like, you have money, I'm lazy, give me some of yours.
But she wants us to know she likes her bourbon neat and her sake chilled. Well, that's good to know.
Oh my God.
Then we have Fahad Ahmad. Let's see where he's from. We need to research each one of these people. Shilpa Alimchandani. She's a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist. Here we have a lawyer at Sarford Heisler Sharp LLP. Evidently, she is not involved
Not yet throwing Molotov cocktails.
Well, and in the charity, she probably knows nothing about charities, because if she did, she wouldn't be on the board of this criminal operation. If we keep going down, there's Jahi Chappelle, Food First, yeah. Gregory Hodge, Capera Consulting, Secretary of the Board of Directors. And here we have Susan Rosenberg. Now look at this. She's a human rights and prisoner rights advocate, adjunct professor. Everyone's an adjunct professor, I will find out. Communications consultant. Her memoir, An American Radical, details her 16 years in federal prison, as well as her conclusions about her prison experience and her past. She was released by Bill Clinton. This is outrageous that this person, she's an adjunct professor, of course, at Hunter College.
Hunter, yeah, oh my God, so she's here in New York.
Yeah, and she lives in Brooklyn.
Oh,
there's a shock.
I don't like Brooklyn, Charles.
But I mean, how does this organization actually fill out its paperwork? Maybe it doesn't fill out its paperwork, maybe it just lies on its paper. In New York, there are very serious questions that need to be asked and answered about who is on the board of something that claims to be a charity. This is a California operation doing business in New York, putting a former prisoner for violent crime on its board, and she evidently is proud of her history, proud to have been involved with the Weather Underground. I mean, this is lunacy.
Well, how is nobody asking Bill Clinton why he has pardoned several terrorists? Was it the FLAN?
I think it's FALN.
FALN, they bombed a restaurant. I think they killed 33 people.
Did they actually kill 33?
I think it was, we'll look that up. But Here's the financials, Charles. How does this look to you?
Do they have a 990 out here? Oh, they have an audit. We can look at that for fun. Fiscal year 2019. It's by Squire Milner, whatever that is. and doesn't seem to be very lengthy. Let's just go slowly here. 1,000 currents and subsidiary. I wonder what the subsidiary is. This is verbiage about what the auditor is supposed to do. If we go to the bottom, slowly. Just the next little bit.
That's someone's name, Squar.
That's the name of the
it's
company.
signed by an L. Is that unusual for a limited liability partnership to sign like that?
No, that's what they always do.
Let me see.
So this, you can do this, but it's not best practice to just have 1 year's balance sheet. When you do it this way, you can't really tell. You can't see that this year was prepared consistently with last year. I'm told by accountants that you're allowed to do this. Note that unrestricted donor funds is 2.4 million, but that 3.9 million are restricted. So ordinarily, it will keep going a little bit into the description. Here's the income statement. If you go past the cash flow statement, which should be next. Wait a second. This gives the details of expenses. Let's see. Consultant fees.
Pretty high.
Very high. 1.4 million. Now, what are those for? Grants, 1.3 million. Travel and meals, $500,000.
It's a lot.
I mean, it's beginning to seem like the template for the Clinton Foundation, right?
I mean, this is a $6 million charity. Having that much in travel, $500,000. That's a lot.
Yeah. And here's the cash flow statement, which is, you can't really check this because you don't have the preceding year's balance sheet. But let's see what they say they are. 1,000 Currents is a California nonprofit public benefit corporation that partners with grassroots groups led by women, youth, and indigenous peoples in the global South.
Global South.
Partners in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Through the Climate Leaders and Movement Action Fund. I mean, then they formed, Buen Vivir Investment Management to act as its implement. This, just at surface level, this screams out for forensic analysis. Where are the actual grants? How much of the money that went to 1,000 Currents for Black Lives Matter? Where is the actual listing of the specific organizations that this 1,000 Currents and subsidiary may have sent money to? Now, if you're a public benefit corporation, that's like a public charity, you are not allowed to give money to something that you claim is a charity, when in fact it's a bunch of grifters who are trying to topple statues and have expensive barbecues and parties afterwards. I mean, that is not what you're allowed to do here. So I have a sneaking suspicion that the team of people I'm familiar with will have a lot to say about the quality of these financial statements. And this is just the so-called audit. How could they have, wait a second, how can they have $4,000 of furniture and nothing else?
What do you mean?
In property.
For property and equipment? Right. Oh, like no computers, no phones?
Nothing. And yet they've got $2 million in total bond funds, equities, exchange, mutual funds, and REITs.
They're depreciating the furniture.
That's good to know.
Well, I mean, that's also, by the way, not that much for furniture, for paying all these...
One big couch or something.
Well, it's like an IKEA desk times 20 or something.
Yeah.
No, I mean, listen, even for setting up a small company like 21st Century 3D, by the time you get done buying chairs and desks and racks for equipment and closets, that seems crazy low.
Now, do we have the 990 for 1,000 Currents?
I don't know. Let's see.
Yeah, they do, down here. Let's look at they don't have the 990 for 2019 yet, but let's see the one for 2018. Public disclosure copy, all right. Let's see, 1,000 Currents.
I imagine a lot of money is spent on collect calls from jail.
Here's Squire Milner, indeed, is, let's see, if we keep going, I want to look at the expense lines, which are coming up probably next few pages. Let's go through that a little bit. Next, here we go. This is the revenue. 6.6 million for this year. They have something called an academy, which I wonder what that is.
Teach people how to gouge eyes.
They sell assets other than inventory. But basically, it's contributions, 6.8 million also. Now let's stop right here. Grants and other assistance to domestic organizations and domestic governments. They claim that they only had 171,000 in this fiscal year went to U.S. domestic organizations. Now this is a California U.S. charity sending $1 million outside. Well, who are these organizations?
They don't tell you?
Well, we'll see in a second. I don't think you're going to find Black Lives Matters on it.
Because you couldn't put that there. It's not an actual.
But you have to put it on
corporate entity.
You'll see on the form there's an entry where it says, list all your grants greater than $5,000. Let's see what they say. Right. This is a public charity, so it's not supposed to give money to individuals or organizations that are not, in fact, charitable without special disclosures. I don't see any grant information. Here we go.
Miscellaneous.
No, we don't see any grant information. Here's the contributors. I'm sure they'll be blacked out, big contributors. But there's no gigantic contributor here, which is suspicious. I would have thought for a $6 million organization, I would have thought there'd be at least a $100,000 grant. Here's a $70,000. So as a guess, they're 170, 288. Now we could figure out who those people are in the crowd by going to, for this year, Open Society Foundation. I bet you one of them is 2,000 currents from George Soros. There's 100,000. So we start seeing more big ones.
150.
Yeah.
85.
Yeah. 165. Yeah. So I'd be very curious who those people are. And then you add all this stuff up. How many big grants were there, and how many? Here's a big one, 2 million.
Oh yeah.
So there's not. If you add all this stuff up, I bet you find that there. I wonder if it even adds up. It seems like there's 575.
Seems like more than 6 million.
Possibly more than 6 million, but very few, under $5,000 grants.
So what does that mean?
That they're probably not disclosing the under $5,000 grants. Right? So remember, Act Blue contributes to 1,000 currents with the idea that 1,000 currents would then send money to Black Lives Matter, which doesn't exist. So keep on going down.
Stock transfer?
That's when a donor gives stock instead of cash. Scroll. Yeah, here we go. This is supplemental financial statements. Nope. Keep going. We'll get to a schedule. It might be E, I think, which gives the grants. Keep going. Oh, yeah. Statement of activity. Go past this one. That's outside. This is just by geographic area. It doesn't give you. Over here, they're telling you the names of the organizations, but these are international grants. All right. So Black Lives Matter has a focus in the United States of America primarily. So let's go and see what for the domestic grants, a lot of international grants, nothing to individuals, and it should have, I think the next one should be domestic grants. Yeah, here we go. Do we see Black Lives Matters? Global Green Grants, the Urgent Action Fund, Grassroots International. Here we go, Black Lives Matter Foundation, $62,000. That's only $62,000 goes to Black Lives Matter Foundation. So let's go into the California Secretary of State. Sorry, the California Register of
Charities.
Charities, yeah, charity registry. And let's see what it says about that one. Here we go.
Just this?
No, you can get that way, but you had it on the next one, I think. This one.
Got it.
Registry of Charitable Trusts. Okay. And it wants... Search, yeah. Not in there, that's the whole thing. You want the Registry of Charitable Trusts. Charities Home, Charities Home, hit that one. Huh.
Can't use ProPublica?
Well, this has some California filings that are let's just see, California. What do they call it? California. Registry of Charitable Trusts in Google, and you should get a better.
What about this initial registration?
No.
Okay. Registry of Charitable Trusts.
Yeah. There we go. That one. Yep. All right. Then do in the name Black Lives Matter Foundation. Organization name, fourth line.
How about just anything Black Lives Matter?
All right. All right. What does it say? Look at this. Black Lives Matter Foundation, not registered, cease and desist order.
Whoa.
Let's see what that says here.
Holy cow. But it's got it's got a federal.
Let's click on the cease and desist order right there.
Wow.
I mean, how much time have we spent on this? 6 minutes?
Right. You're that good, Charles.
Cease and desist from all operations, including all solicitation for charitable purposes by any means.
Wow, by any means necessary.
And this is Xavier Becerra telling them to cease and desist.
It's from December 2019, Charles. How come no one has said anything about this?
Because this is.
Let's see what it says here. Pursuant to government code section blah, 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 you are ordered to immediately cease and desist from all operations, including all solicitation for charitable purposes by any means. This order applies to Black Lives Matter Foundation, its officers, directors, employees, and all persons or entities acting on its behalf.
Black Lives Matter Foundation failed to register with the Attorney General. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes.
Clinton Foundation? Black Lives Matter failed to file annual financial reports, Clinton Foundation. And here's an example of a person of color, Xavier Becerra, going after Black Lives Matter Foundation, which is a tiny little charity, but letting the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, Clinton Health Access Initiative, the Clinton Global Initiative, on and on and on, solicit, doing exactly, but they'll go after this poor little Black Lives Matter Foundation. I mean, does that seem like a double standard to you?
It just seems like business as usual to me, Charles. We got a bunch of grifters and bullies.
Let's look and see if Black Lives Matter Foundation is registered in New York State. I wonder if it is.
What, ProPublica or where?
That's NYS Charity Bureau. Yeah, you got it right there. Yep, that one. Black Lives Matter Foundation. Or just put it Black Lives Matter and see what we get. Now you said you heard, and I heard too, the speaker at the Columbus Circle.
They showed up with shirts.
Yeah, said that
We are Black Lives Matter New York.
Which was set up in 2013, I heard her say.
Wait, this red thing I think means they have nothing. No
yeah,
matches.
you got to put the name in, and then you got to hit search at the bottom.
I did that.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I did that the first time. It's weird.
So then if we go into another way to do this is, let's do GoFundMe and see.
Oh, there's a lot of GoFundMe.
Let's see how many there are for this. And again, the point here is not to question whether or not there has been racial injustice in the United States of America. Of course there was racial injustice in the United States of America. There actually is racial injustice and other types of injustice spread around the world. The largest active slave market, thanks to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, is currently in Libya. And we, all citizens in the United States, all taxpayers, are subsidizing, we have subsidized the creation of that slave market by failing to hold people to account for our policies in Libya. But I actually was thinking if you could just search in the main search icon for, if we get to the GoFundMe page, and then we can search and you'll get a report how many people are saying they're raising money for GoFundMe, start a GoFundMe. Search GoFundMe, Black Lives Matter. But not punched together, 9,000 different. So.
That's a lot, Charles.
Look, 2.4 million raised, 79,000. If you just go down this page, 700,000 raised, 200,000, 200,000. None of these organizations technically exist.
Well, but also their purpose is to destroy the police, and I got to imagine that that's not a valid charitable thing.
And I don't know who owns GoFundMe. But
I do. We were talking about him. He seems to be perhaps a scumbag.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Because something happened to a crowdsource the truth. Oh, it was John Mark Dugan had a GoFundMe to raise money for the Burisma whistleblower, and he was like close to having the right amount of money, and they shut it down. And he got into this whole. This was a big deal. The last interview with John Mark Dugan, they made him. They said that you can't do a GoFundMe for someone whose identity is secret. So he told this woman, and she said, "It's okay. Here's a scan of my passport. Send it to them." So John Mark Dugan sends it to GoFundMe. The next day, her door gets kicked in, and these guys who beat her up had the image of the passport.
That's not good.
That came from GoFundMe.
That's not good.
According to John Mark Dugan.
That's not good at all. So I wonder, Jason, if you could Google Katrina Blinova and scam. And I think you'll get to her latest. It's EKATERINA, and then scam. Should come right up. No. Yeah. Here we go. It's right here.
Oops. This?
Yep. Now, this is her latest piece. She did this interviewing me and our friend Bob Bishop, who's mentioned in this. But this is a lengthy piece. I'm not being coy or anything. I believe there are going to be follow-on pieces diving deeply into this. I would encourage people to read actually anything that Katerina Blinova writes. But she's done over 100 different pieces with me. And back when I went to my first little elementary school, St. Luke's School down the village, I remember in nursery school, we would have to go, there were actual air raid siren drills every day. We had to go into the basement, whatever, and I would ask my parents, "What's this all about?" "Oh, that's the Soviet Union, the communists, they're going to get you." And never in my wildest dreams then did I think that the folks in Russia would do a far better job in 2020 getting to the bottom of what's really going on in America. Whereas the mainstream MSNBC, CNN types are so far, they're not even, I don't think they're a wing at all. I think they're just straight up crazy, these people at CNN and MSNBC and other places.
It's interesting to note, Charles, it appears that GoFundMe has a new CEO, or a new CEO is coming soon. I didn't know that.
Good. But I started down a track of saying that if Facebook, if GoFundMe, if Twitter are basically involved as fundraising agents for entities that are not charities, then they need to be disciplined.
Well, but people are also in the comments right now, Charles, telling us that people like Candace Owens got their GoFundMe taken down. Dan Dix got his thing.
It shouldn't be too hard to maybe set up a site that would only raise money, just like you used to have a good housekeeping seal of approval when that mattered, would only raise money for legitimate charities that had their paperwork in order. That would be an interesting thing to do.
That would be novel.
It would be novel and nice. And then you could have maybe a rating agency that would actually rate charities.
We've got KCD saying Black Lives Matter has a 501c3.
Show us the name of it. It may well have an entity purporting. Black Lives Matter Foundation held itself out to be a 501c3. The challenge is to then go on the IRS website and check and see if this entity that purports to be a 501c3 is technically still a 501c3. The way it works is, normally if you use careful lawyers, which are the type I like to use, I mean, why would you pay?
Met too many of those.
I know quite a few of them. And normally what the lawyers tell you is that it is very dangerous to fundraise for an entity until you've actually gotten your determination letter from the IRS. Now, yeah, there are many. We've shown you the cease and desist order for this one. You can
Is
go.
that the first one?
The first one is the one that has a cease and desist order. Okay.
Right.
But then you go down these other ones, and basically very few of them check out, if any. Now here's let's look at, for fun, New York Black Lives Matter Inc. Let's see, maybe that checks out.
They're in the Bronx.
Okay, well let's look. It didn't come up in the charity register, so let's look back in that New York State charity register. Let's put in New York Black Lives Matter Inc. and see what comes up.
What about their EIN?
Or that you could do that too. That's good.
But I mean, searching for Black Lives Matter should have brought that.
I know, but let's just for good. NY Charities Bureau. Yep. There you go, and you got the EIN.
Oh, but you got to do it like this.
It's got a 4 there.
Yeah. Tricky because it's far away. Okay, here we go.
Just 8-1.
Economy of clicks to some extent. Is it searching? It's always a delay.
Yeah. Bingo.
Nothing.
Yeah. So I think
Not registered with New York State is what that means, right?
right.
Well, let's just show everybody again that I was doing that properly. So we put in here, what was it, 8-1,
Yeah.
4 something. There it is.
Yeah.
Let's just confirm. 47209.
No, that's correct. You can also do it. Another thing you can do is New York entity search. That's the Secretary of State website. So it's possible they set up a corporation, but didn't actually bother, with those pesky details. There you go. Just put in Black Lives Matter. Let's see what we get. And why this matters as we go through it. When you do as the Clintons do, and you got a famous topic, and you hold yourselves out, you got to punch in 13517.
Sorry.
When you hold yourself out as a great cause, and you get a lot of attention, 13517. And you get a lot of attention, money will flow towards your designated account. All right, so here's Black Lives Matter Greater New York Inc.
But that's a different name, isn't it?
Yeah. Black Lives Matter Inc.
Real estate fund? This
Yeah.
is totally
Right.
different.
Right, and let's, for the hell of it, let's punch up the first one and see what happens. Okay, this was set up in 16 in the Bronx.
The other one's in the Bronx too, isn't it?
Right, but this is in 16. They started doing business in New York in 2013 and 14. And as you know, if you want to be a charity, you have to be an association, corporation, or a trust. And you have to be organized before you start soliciting.
Rise Above points out, and then stop reporting. They have 3 years of stealing money.
Right. And so...
Tax-free.
Right, exactly. And the first trick, as we've said all along in the Clinton Foundation, it's not what's in the financial statements that's important, it's what isn't in the financial statements.
Right.
I mean, we see...
Frugal criminals know how to
Right.
do it.
I mean, we should maybe do a public service announcement for crooks. If you want to set up a really crooked charity, try this. But
Jeez.
we have just spent maybe 20, 25 minutes on the topic. And last I heard, there is an FBI, and there are...
Is there, though?
I think so. And there's the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. Tax rates are very high in New York State.
Yeah, they send me letters all the time.
Right, so with one of these things, you can get, guilt-ridden corporations who want to virtue signal. They won't check anything. They'll give you $2 million so they can get on a list of people saying...
Amazon, Nike.
Yeah, you name it.
Almost everything you go on now says that.
Right, and so you really... And what we need... What's really going on here is that the pool of money that might be directed to address the legitimate concerns, the true searching concerns that exist throughout this country, particularly, I might add, in Democrat-controlled cities and states that have run business out, private sector business out of their cities and states.
Literally.
Have jacked taxes up, have made situations more and more unsafe, putting people of color and people living in blighted neighborhoods ever more in danger. And now with the latest cockamamie theme that they're going to defund the police and eliminate plainclothes policemen. I mean, this is just a shit show, frankly. And what are happening is these merchants of misery are glomming on to these causes, and who knows how much money has actually been stolen before it reaches the books, if they ever get books together. And then once it's in these charities, how much of that money gets stolen by saying that you traveled when you didn't travel, or you hired a consultant when you didn't hire a consultant. It's just really gross.
It's a big problem, Charles. I don't know. What do you see happening?
I think that we got to get from here to July 4th and hope that we make it from here to July 4th, and they don't try to instigate a Maidan Square moment where they get masses of people storming into a place where the television cameras will like to shoot photographs.
I'm sure you've heard the fireworks. It hasn't been the past couple nights, but there were a few nights in a row where there were loud explosions going on, and the newspaper reported as illegal fireworks displays.
Right.
Sounded like they were bombing stuff.
Right.
And then I heard FDNY sirens coming out of here,
right.
But when I asked the firemen, nothing. And I didn't really see too much reporting on it.
Right.
And it's far too dangerous for me to go out and do what I do at night. I would definitely be attacked.
Exactly. Now, we do have a little bit of good news to report, and that's the development in the appeals court in Flynn.
Ah, yes.
It's a temporary victory.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. The news reporting that I've seen about it just while we were on live here is acting like this is the end of it. But I'm going to be doing a special show tonight at 9 p.m. with Jared Beck. And he has already, in just a cursory examination of the brief, found numerous ways that Emmett Sullivan and whoever else could make more problems for General Flynn if they want to. And I think there's a very good possibility that they want to.
Well, and I was checking the news right before we went on air, and I believe this jerk who Emmett Sullivan appointed to try to Gleason has already asked for an extension to file a response here.
Wow. I mean, it was just absolutely devastating, this opposition to the amicus brief that Sidney Powell filed, basically saying that Emmett Sullivan is defying the separation of powers, that there is no controversy, that the judge is not empowered to impanel a special prosecutor or to continue to argue this contest when the parties say there is no contest. And, Mike Moore was raising the point that Sullivan was talking about perjury and stuff, basically because Flynn had, under sworn testimony said, I did X, Y, and Z and pled out to the plea. But I think he was incorrect, because what happened is after that, this exculpatory evidence came out. There's plenty of stories of people who even get convicted and go to jail, and then later DNA evidence or whatever proves that they didn't do it, and they get exonerated. So, I mean, if this evidence comes to light, and particularly because it was deliberately withheld by the prosecutors during the discovery period when Flynn was supposed to have access. They are legally bound to provide him with that. It's just open and shut. They broke the law.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there must be much stricter regulation of all professions, frankly, of lawyers
especially,
and accountants. So no lawyer ever seems to get, in recent memory, no big law firm gets put out of business. There was a firm called Finley Cumble, which was egregiously involved in all kinds of crooked activities, and it was forced to disband. But it's Cumble is spelled, no, it's Finley Cumble.
There's some gumball.
Kumble, I think. Finley Cumble collapse.
Oh.
It was a litigation specialist, and they just...
Where's the thing that says collapse?
They went bankrupt here, very top. Fourth largest law firm in the United States. At its peak was second to Baker & McKenzie. That's the firm I was trying to remember the name of. I had a run-in with them. But, it should be when lawyers get involved in contentious matters,
it gets worse.
Well, they have the opportunity, when they make a mistake, if they don't hire another firm to defend them, they have the benefit of all these idle associates and maybe idle partners that they can force them to work extra hours and, make your life miserable if you're on the other side of it. And so when lawyers fall so egregiously outside the boundaries of the law, as happened in the FBI and the Department of Justice and lawyers for same, there needs to be a real explanation to the general public of how bad these crimes were, over what period of time they were involved. There need to be stark consequences. I mean, here I'd be in favor of I believe the approach that was taken by the residents, the original residents in North America. I don't like to call them Indians. What they would do, and you get an egregious person who's, can't be part of the group anymore, they just force you to leave. Try fending for yourself in the wilderness with no help, no food, no nothing. I think these lawyers who hid exculpatory evidence and are still hiding. Just yesterday, we got a response. A response that the Justice Department warning that there could be additional exculpatory evidence that has not yet been provided to General Flynn. I mean, how on June 24th, 2020, with this matter in the appeals court, maybe heading to en banc appeal and heading up to Supreme Court, how the hell could the Justice Department still be withholding exculpatory evidence in this matter? And if they're withholding it in this matter, think about what else is still being withheld. Think about what's in the FBI files. To digress a little bit, we know there's a system called the Sentinel system on all these FBI matters, and that generally speaking, when the FBI comes up with stuff, they put it in the Sentinel system. We found in the Clinton Foundation case, and I think possibly in the mishandling of classified information case, that decisions are made to keep relevant material off Sentinel, which is, I think, a way of flouting.
Keeping it out of the record.
Keeping it out of the record. That should not be allowed. Nor, of course, should the Secretary of State be allowed to keep all the personal records the government records that occurred during her tenure.
How about the furniture? And
the furniture. and keep it all on the toilet bowl server with the unvetted Canadian BlackBerry devices. I mean, this to me, we have an image, I think, at least I had an image, that the government has too many people in it, it has too much money, it therefore must conduct everything by the book. I think we're finding out that certain portions of the government, the SEC, maybe the IRS, maybe the Justice Department, the FBI, their people are too busy having affairs with one another and watching porn to
playing with
Legos to actually get important stuff done. I mean, there should have been a grown-up in the Obama White House and in the Department of Justice then and the FBI then and said, look, no freaking way are we, under no circumstances, are we going to investigate Hillary Clinton's political opponent under, as it were, trumped up charges. We're just not doing that.
But why not? We're covering up all her crimes.
You raise a good point. And this guy, I mean, this smug, lying, bitch, frankly. I mean, he's just outrageous that he should be sitting there in a multi-million-dollar house with multi-million-dollars in assets, having spent a far from exemplary career in public service, get a book deal, be lionized. This man belongs in an orange and black jumpsuit for the rest of his life.
He would probably do okay in prison. He's super tall. He could join the Aryan Brotherhood. They'd protect him.
Yeah. He could stop wearing those ridiculous... What is it with these shoes with white soles?
I don't know.
Anyway, those are sneakers. Shoes.
Yeah, I don't know. He's got
his Lego set.
Got the Legos. He's got to be upset. There was a sign on the Lego store in Rockefeller Center there that I think you have to order the Legos online and go there to get it. But there's nobody in the store.
Yeah, that's another thing. I don't know how much you've been around looking at stores.
Why do you need the store if you're ordering it online and picking it up? By the time you get there and come back, just deliver it tomorrow.
And I just, anecdotally, I walk everywhere, or try to, on good weather, and I noticed in the restaurants, they're open again.
It's like two people eating there.
But they're right next to each other. They're seated, they're not 6 feet apart. And, why at this stage you'd want to go to a restaurant is beyond me. Until this is, until it's safe, until, until you can socialize. I mean, invite your friends to your house.
Right. Yeah. Well, safe, you mean out on the street from not having somebody hit you in the head with a brick sitting there. But that's the reason I don't want to go to a restaurant.
Or walk in. I remember after Ferguson, people went into that restaurant in Pershing Square.
Oh, yeah.
One Sunday with baseball bats and started breaking up the restaurant and, well, our lives aren't comfortable, so you can't enjoy Sunday brunch. I mean, like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah.
A lot's wrong with that.
Right. Wow. It's a really troubling situation, Charles. I mean, Chinese army boots, somebody says in the comments. I'm not sure I understand what that means. What happened with this BAZ, the Black House Autonomous Zone? The newspaper...
Oh, that's down in Washington, D.C. So what
they're declaring it as there, like the news.
Yeah, well, that thing is going to be this. I believe I also read a story today that the National Guard is going to be called in to protect monuments in Washington, D.C. And I assume we are not going to go down the route of France, which and certain European nations, Sweden, have allowed autonomous zones to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there are large portions of France that you cannot go into.
Well, I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, so what they did...
In Paris?
Not, out in regions outside Paris and the south of France and these big cities, they have these zones which are under the control of the immigrants, and the police won't go in there.
Oh, no-go zones.
No-go zones.
Right.
Yeah. And so you don't want... That cannot happen. That's a cancer on a country. You cannot... The second you tolerate
It's an invasion.
No, the second you tolerate it, you've lost your country.
Right.
And it's a ridiculous concept. Those who want to advocate, it's like, I remember when ISIS started, there were these pie-eyed Western women who would, decide that they wanted to join ISIS.
They're all dead now, aren't they?
Many of them are dead. Others have been raped constantly and are begging to come back. And our government is saying, you made your choice.
Wow.
You took up arms against the U.S.
Yeah, why would we help you now?
I mean, it's a similar idea. This idea, there is no concept of an autonomous zone, other than for Native American. Yeah.
Ukraine free territory?
That's not. I'm saying inside the United States, there are no autonomous zones save for whatever you want to call the places where the original residents live. But in New York City, there are no autonomous zones, and there never should be. Although I wouldn't be surprised. You and I were in Washington Square Park on Sunday, and we saw,
No, that was developing into an autonomous zone. I mean, I went there on Monday to check it out, and the guy who was in there had a female companion who basically came at me like a rabid animal.
It's not an autonomous zone. I think it's called a shithole.
Exactly. And I asked the police, why are they allowing people to occupy that area, assault park goers? And they were like, oh.
And the thing that's really happening, it's happening in boardrooms, it's happening in private businesses. Evidently, Kelly explains that in Fairfax, Virginia, the schools aren't going to be open. I mean, that's preposterous.
That's destroying the lives of little kids. They're not going to be socialized. What if you're 5 and you're supposed to go to school and now you sit at home looking at a computer instead of going to kindergarten or first grade?
Well, one of the biggest expenditures I had, for taxes were school taxes. Even though my kids went to private school, I still have to pay.
Well, they'll keep that money, but you can't
right,
use
exactly.
the school.
The schools will be closed. Everybody gets paid. The travel budgets are still there. We go to conferences. We're just not going to educate you, because that's how we roll. I mean, there are no grown-ups, frankly, it would seem, in these local governments to say, now, wait a minute. I mean, the statistics that I've seen on COVID, we've talked about this from the very beginning. I saw a recent study, I forget who authored it, that the chances of dying from COVID if you're less than 70 years old were infinitesimally small, smaller than flu, right? So there would have been a solution, instead of having these press conferences and this and that, you could have said, how old are you?
Right.
Okay. If you're under 70, do what you want.
Right.
If you have these various
Cancer
conditions, maybe you should be. But if you're over 70, and the percentage of people who are over 70 in the United States of America,
small.
It's growing, but it's not.
But in the workforce.
Well, the workforce is tiny, but in total, it's not a big number. And so to lock the entire country down.
Biggest mistake in my lifetime.
Yeah, it really is. And, and then to go all hyperbolic because the number of reported cases, they say, there's 6,000 new cases. There are 325 million people in America.
But it's also just positive tests.
I
It's
know.
not even necessarily being sick. And then the guy who owns the hair salon that I go to and his wife were telling me they have to be tested every 2 weeks, and it charges their health insurance. So what's that going to do to your health insurance premium?
Well, why every 2 weeks? I mean, if you're really
Because
serious,
they're running the store. This is the rule for if you're
why
doing.
would do it every day?
Oh, they got to shove that thing in your nose.
It's not. No, there's a test that doesn't.
No,
involve it.
they said they're getting the thing in the nose.
So they don't have the Trump test that is not invasive?
They told me they're getting the thing shoved in the nose and it's very unpleasant and they have to do it every 2 weeks. So, I mean, look, if you owed 3 months' rent, I just don't even understand. Even when there wasn't an international crisis going on, if I got behind a month on the rent, how would you overcome that?
Yeah.
And they're also saying, can't do any business. And he told me that many of the people that normally come to the place have called him to say that their company, they're going to be working from home. They're not coming into Manhattan anymore. He also, months or years ago, had told me that he had started some new thing advertising in a hotel magazine, and they had a lot of people coming from hotels, a lot of tourists
that makes
coming.
sense.
And now there's none.
No, there's no tourists, yeah. I mean,
Hotels, I saw, said this property is temporarily closed.
Right. Well, and then if you think about, why did I come back to New York City in 1980 when I got my MBA? Because if you wanted to be an investment banker in America, you had to work principally in New York City. And so now the deal is you pay for expensive college, you pay for expensive business school, finally you get the Goldman Sachs job, and then they tell you, thanks for renting your very expensive apartment that you can't afford, we want you to work from home.
Right.
Why do you have a big office space here in New York City? I mean, I think what's going to happen out of all this is forward-looking people who are well-capitalized are going to say, you know what, on the balance of probabilities, there could be another COVID-like experience. New York is extremely expensive. De Blasio is a nut job.
Yeah.
Cuomo is stupider.
Yeah.
And it is unlikely that anybody will be able to smack common sense into the electorate and into these politicians for decades. So rather than stand there as Goldman Sachs, the really rich company, and other rich companies and investment funds in this declining, decaying shitholi, let's get out of this mess, particularly because we've now learned that you can work from home.
Right.
I mean, I think the dislocation caused by Fauci and Birx, and frankly also by Donald Trump's embracing of Fauci and Birx. I mean, Donald Trump doesn't do everything right and he doesn't do everything wrong. But on this one,
this was the biggest mistake.
It's a big mistake.
He should have told them all to shut up, get out of my office, we're not closing the country.
Right.
That would have been bold leadership, and he would have been proven right.
Right, and take special care of the people, 70 and up and whatever.
But you know what, Charles? The only question in my mind, because we have seen, I think, good evidence to support the hypothesis that COVID-19 could be a biological attack, either from people literally spreading material around where a lot of people are, or preloading flu vaccines with stuff that some secondary component could activate something in there, or a variety of methods. And it's possible that if that's correct, if someone did this as a biological attack, maybe they said to Trump, if you don't close down the country, we're going to release this in a spray can from an airplane and everybody will die. And then you'll be the president that let 2 million people die.
Yeah, I have a feeling, I mean, I don't know Donald Trump, but I just have a feeling he would say, oh, let me think about that, and then,
kill them.
Soleimani. Hey, you want to be the Soleimani special.
Well,
dude.
but if that's true, then he's made a huge mistake.
Yeah, but the evidence so far on the details surrounding coming back to work, we don't see hospitalizations. Apparently in Houston, they're saying that the ICU is operating at 97%, intensive care units are 97% of capacity. I don't know whether that's true or false, but in the other data that I've seen, these spikes in COVID patients' test results, COVID test results does not translate into an increase in hospital visits or deaths. And I think we need to have some, we've had how many months of this? 3-4 months of it? Let's look at the data.
On 4 for sure.
How does the data in your monthly model compare to monthly reality?
I mean, I think it doesn't.
Yeah.
And as I was walking around yesterday, it doesn't look like phase 2. There were definitely more cars driving than we've seen over the past few weeks, but Still a lot of boarded up businesses, still a lot of businesses that, have the opportunity to open, but I'm sure they're facing a lot of the same questions that my friend is. Or
Wait a minute. This is somebody with a dog across.
That's not a real dog. It's a homeless guy sitting there with some kind of
fake dog across from Trump Tower?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And today they said that de Blasio is putting up some banner that says Black Lives Matters right across the street from Trump Tower just to troll Trump.
Yeah, well,
de Blasio's got to go. How can't we, why can't we have a process like what they did to Gray Davis? What was that again? A recall?
Again, I think you've got an electorate problem here in New York City. I mean, it's only getting exacerbated by the fact that many people are moving out.
And exasperated.
Exactly. And sarsaparilla.
You know what? I'm getting emails that apartments in this building are going on the market, but I just don't think that anybody is going to take them. I mean, everybody I talk to is like, why the hell do we want to stay here?
Right. Exactly. So I don't know if there are other topics, Jason, you want to cover?
I think we're good, Charles. We're going to be back on Sunday, and people can join us then. I do want to thank people who are joining on Patreon and Subscribestar. It's important that sponsors know that the Patreon app does not work with the security settings that I use. So if you're watching on iOS or Android, you've got to use Safari or Google Chrome, and then it works totally fine. But if people go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, they help support the show. They get access to a huge library of sponsor-exclusive content, and it allows me to keep these kind of reports coming. I thought that was a great interview with Kelly. She's like such a strong speaker. She's got that down, right?
Right, very good representative for the campaign.
Absolutely.
Very impressive.
All right, Charles. Well, I'll see you on Sunday, and I'll be back tonight at 9 p.m. with Jared Beck reviewing this opposition to the amicus brief and the decision from the appellate court. See what he has to say.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Charles, and thanks everybody for watching.